Asta e fuz artistic. Picioarele noastre. Fără picioare și fără extra. We start, no?
Yes, absolutely.
Bună seara! Bună seara temerarilor care ați venit între furtuni la sinagogă. Înseamnă că prezența domnului profesor Andrei Markovits, Andrew Markovits, Andy, etc., nu știu alte, și Steven, nu? Așa?
Steven never, but Andrei is very good.
Ok. V-a suscitat atenția și vă mulțumim. Și sunt convinsă că și mâine la universitate, când o să fie prezent la ora 11, veți fi unii și acolo și vom avea și pe alții care astăzi nu au putut să ajungă. Este o bucurie pentru noi să-l avem a doua oară în mijlocul comunității noastre pe domnul profesor. A fost aici în urmă cu 11 ani și atunci a fost prezent și la Universitatea de Vest. Și țin minte că a avut o conferință care a suscitat multe discuții. Acum ne bucurăm că vine deodată cu cartea pe care recent a lansat-o și la București, Casa din Pașaport, cartea sa autobiografică, care pleacă desigur din Timișoara, orașul său de baștină, de unde a plecat la 9 ani. Nu vreau să monopolizez eu discuția, îi voi da cuvântul domnului profesor și îi voi traduce din limba engleză și îi mulțumesc din suflet că este azi alături de noi și cu toată deschiderea ne-a oferit aceste cărți, toată partea sa din cărțile de la Hasefer pe care le-a oferit comunității noastre. Mulțumim mult!
Mulțumesc! How do you say maybe in Romanian?
Poate.
Poate. Ok. Poate că nu trebuie să traduiesc, pentru cred că everybody understands English, no? No?
Toată lumea înțelege engleză?
Engleză or
nu chiar.
Nu toate. Ok. Eu sunt foarte embarrassed pentru că nu vorbesc românește. Am fost un copil a 9 ani când am plecat din Timișoara și n-am vorbit niciodată românește, sunt analfabet românește pentru am fost în școala germană și la casă am vorbit ungurește. Este the standard de evrei copii din mon milieu, cum Eva, and that's part of the first chapter of the book, to describe this particular Jewish milieu. So I'm very sorry that I just am not able to speak to you in Romanian, but it's just I tried it in Bucharest. It's not good enough. I can't do it. I can understand it. It's Latin. I mean, Romanian is a Latin language. It's so beautiful. Actually, to me, it's like Portuguese. It's not by chance the two furthest of the core. The two furthest Latin languages are the most varied and so to me it's like Portuguese, which I love, but also don't speak.
Deci spunea, prima parte a volumului se referă chiar la partea aceasta timișoreană, la acest mediu timișorean atât de poliglot, în care se vorbeau atâtea limbi, maghiară, germană unde a fost la școala germană și maghiară în familie, și se simte jenat și îi pare rău că nu poate să comunice în limba română. Din păcate, la lansarea de la București s-a văzut că nu sunt cunoștințe suficiente în acest sens.
So I will actually not talk much about the book per se, other than about the Timișoara part. And I will start with the whole day, and yesterday was a walk down memory lane for me. I went to see the place where I had Ella Philip, my hated piano teacher. I hated her.
Nu voi vorbi despre Timișoara ca atare, ci despre o călătorie în timp pe care am făcut-o ieri și astăzi, văzând câteva locuri importante de ale mele din Timișoara și, de exemplu, m-am dus să văd locuri unde era profesoara de pian, pe care o uram foarte tare, Ella Philip, care era profesoara de pian.
Yeah. She, on the Lloyd Shore, Lloyd's, I of course, Eva actually helped me where it was. I also visited or looked up Dr. Bodea's office, where my tonsils were taken out, and I had a horrible, lasting trauma, because what happened was that he had these two fairly heavy women sit on my legs and then put this ether on my face. So to this day, I actually still have sort of claustrophobic things about thinking of a Dr. Bodea, but I actually visited the place.
Și a văzut cabinetul doctorului Bodea, cel care i-a scos amigdalele, într-un mod foarte traumatic, două femei corpulente care au stat pe picioare ca să-l imobilizeze.
Corpulent, excellent, yes. Very good, yes, corpulent, beautiful. I visited the Parcul Roselor. I visited my house, which of course now is not on Strada Kutuzov #1, but it's actually a different name. And I walked by my school, the Școala Medie numărul 2, Nicolaus Lenau Schule, where I will go tomorrow, thanks to a very dear new friend who's here, and Benin, who's a wonderful guide of Timișoara. The Capitol Theater, where at the time it was both a movie and a concert hall. So I saw two films which I will never forget. Unde nu zboare vulturii. Unde nu zboare vulturii. When I heard in the Tarom flight, flying from Amsterdam, zboare, I said, zboare! I never heard that word before. Unde nu zboare vulturii, 1951, Where Vultures Don't Fly, a British film, horrible film, whatever. And then, in 1954, Ulysses, the Odysseus story with Kirk Douglas.
Rezum un pic, a văzut casa unde au stat părinții, liceul Lenau, cu ajutorul unui ghid foarte bun pe care l-a descoperit acum, și cinematograful Capitol, care era cinematograf și sală de concerte în același timp, unde a văzut două filme care de asemenea i-au marcat existența, Unde nu zboară vulturii și Ulysses.
And in Ulysses, of course, as you well know, he descends into Hades, the underworld. And interestingly, I was not afraid. I was a little boy. I was not afraid of the Cyclops, the giant with one eye. This was okay. This was cool with me. And I was not afraid of the three-headed dog, Kerberos. Okay? But what really scared me and had my mother take me home was when he goes down and meets Ajax, Agamemnon, and Achilles, and the way they portrayed them as these ghosts. And since then, I never watch horror films.
Ceea ce l-a impresionat în filmul Ulise nu a fost că a coborât în Hades și că nici Cerberul cu cele trei capete, nici Ciclopii, ci au fost spectrul lui Agamemnon și Achille, și de atunci nu se mai uită la filme horror.
Luciana, you are so brilliant with this. You actually have a new job if you want.
I like mythology.
No, but you do a great job summarizing this. It's excellent. So the Lloyd's, the Capitol Theater. It was wonderful to spend a morning with Dr. Eva Gal Bleier, with whom we just reminisced for 2 hours, and we could have reminisced for another 4 hours about who happened to this and that, and talking about locations. And so in a sense, I thought about this. American universities, unlike European universities, have this notion of being a home. Okay, this is very important. In loco parentis, at home, has problems. And so there's one thing that every university has once a semester, once a year. It's called homecoming. When all the alumni and alumni come back, come home, okay? And when I just went to the bathroom, I'm sorry I had to go to the bathroom twice because I drank too much Coca-Cola. It was so hot today. I thought of, to me, this is sort of homecoming. It's a kind of a homecoming, and I was one of the alumni of Timișoara. I'm one of the alumni of Timișoara and of this Jewish community to where I'm returning after a long hiatus.
Și astăzi a vizitat împreună cu doamna Eva Blaier Timișoara și a fost la capitol și a făcut o mare plăcere să-și aducă aminte de acest loc și și-a adus aminte de acest spațiu care este ca acasă, pentru că universitățile din Statele Unite au acest obicei de a fi un spațiu acasă, unde se întorc studenții în fiecare an. Iar ceea ce este Timișoara astăzi pentru domnul profesor este o reîntoarcere acasă, un lucru pe care l-a realizat acum.
Amazing. You're very good. Amazing. Because my Romanian is good enough to check you. You know, you cannot make mistakes. Okay. And then lastly, of course, apropos homecoming, this. I mean, this was my shul, to use a Yiddish term, which of course we never called this a shul. Okay, it was not a shul, it was clear. Shul was for Orthodox. And this was the synagogue that my father and I came to for 9 years, okay? And I remember every single time we came, could you, please, excuse me? No, don't do that, it's just, every time my father and I came around the opera, he would grab my hand and he would say something like, Ferenc József jött ide 1872-be, okay? It was very important to him that that the emperor, okay, came from distant Vienna to inaugurate our temple, okay?
Și îi reprezintă, almost lost me. Sinagoga, niciodată n-a fost acesta un șul, ci a fost o sinagogă. Iar de fiecare dată când în cei 9 ani petrecuți aici, tatăl a venit la această sinagogă și pe această stradă, își aducea aminte cum Franz Josef în 1872 a venit să inaugureze acest spațiu special.
Always adding that there were only 2 Habsburg emperors who were not anti-Semites. Joseph II, 1780 to 1790, the big reformer, and Francis Joseph, okay, the emperor. And he always mentioned this. And it was also very telling of my father and of very much of the milieu that this was basically a Habsburg milieu. And to him, the yichus, to use a good Yiddish term, the yichus of being sort of giving the weight, the charisma of weight, of authority, really always depended on states or someone like the emperor. This was so important to him. It was always very much, I write about this in the book a lot, that it was very important to him to have this sort of recognition, especially by aristocracies and whatever. This is very common for the Jewish milieu of the time.
Și întotdeauna tatăl său sublinia că au fost doar 2 împărați care nu au fost antisemiți, Franț al II-lea, care a fost între 1708... Iosif al II-lea, care a fost între 1780 și 1790 și Franz Josef, despre care era vorba, și întotdeauna se vorbea despre această necesitate a autorității, a faptului că era nevoie ca drepturile evreilor să fie statuate de o putere mai mare și ei au făcut acest lucru.
To be accepted, yes. And then, of course, coming in here, this is incredible. I mean, my father and I sat where the professor of architecture is sitting right now. with my father here. My mother was up there. And in fact, to make it even almost unheimlich or eerie, a couple of days before coming here, I was looking through some old books and I found in one of the Machzorim, Comunitatea Evreilor din Timișoara, Sinagoga din Cetate, loc femeiesc, number 116. Cu acest tabilet se poate ocupa numai locul cu numărul de mai sus de o singură persoană. And this is for the high holidays, the Yom Tovim, of sărbătorii evreiești in anul 5709, which was in 1948. Listen, Rosh Hashanah, luni, 4th of September. Rosh Hashanah number 2, March, 5th of September. Yom Kippur, Mercury, September 13, 1948. I was born on October 6, 1948. So my mother must have sat up there like this. I mean, it's incredible, and I found this. It's amazing, absolutely amazing.
Domnul profesor și tatăl său stăteau acolo unde stă domnul arhitect Sechei acum, iar mama stătea acolo cum stau femeile tradițional sus și a găsit acest bilețel, într-o carte de rugăciune veche a găsit acest bilețel care îl primeau femeile, care spunea care este locul ei și când era sărbătoarea de Rosh Hashanah, de anul nou, și era din 1948. Iar domnul profesor s-a născut în 1948 în octombrie, iar aceasta era din septembrie, deci era probabil foarte gravidă în momentul în care a primise acest bilețel.
Exactly. Okay, so what I will do is say just a few words about our Timișoara existence, and I will not, many other lectures I give, of course, include many other things in the book, and actually Timișoara is only one chapter. There is a lot about music in the book. If you're interested in music from opera and classical all the way to rock and roll, this is the book. And above all, sports. And these are the two most important languages that united my father and me. And the whole book is an homage to my father. I would not have achieved any of the successes, and I've had quite a few, without the love that my father gave me. And it was a very tormented relationship. We had a lot of fights, we had a lot of disagreements, a lot of tension, but there were two spaces which were always sort of uncontested: sports and music. And it's not by chance that those are the ones that remain so uncontested and so important to this day for me, with my father going to the Știința Timișoara matches when I was a little boy, and also, of course, going to classical music.
Cartea vorbește despre Timișoara în general, dar se referă foarte mult la muzică, de la muzică clasică la rock and roll și de asemenea la sport. Acestea sunt cele două domenii care l-au unit cu tatăl său, iar cartea este un omagiu, este o apreciere târzie adusă pentru tatăl său, care a avut o relație specială, o relație adesea turmentată, cu conflicte, cu dispute, dar care nu erau pe tărâmul acesta al muzicii și al sportului, care a fost întotdeauna unul pașnic. Și mergeau împreună la meciurile Știința
Timișoara, yes. So, as I said, the book is a lot about other universities. It's about politics. It's again, I will not address this because we don't have time, and especially poor Luciana cannot translate political philosophy here. But the book is about a certain location, about a Habsburg city, which at the time was about 50% Romanian speaking, 20% Hungarian and German. and the rest Serbian Bulgarian, which is, of course, it is not now. And it's also an era of basically of Stalinism, which was a very problematic one, especially also for Jews. And so it's really a book about the Cold War and about a certain era in which the Markovits family developed, which I would like to present here and then stop. Yeah.
E vorba în carte despre un oraș în Imperiul Habsburgic, despre un oraș în care odinioară 50% vorbeau română, alții vorbeau maghiară, germană, sârbă, bulgară. Bineînțeles, acum nu este situația aceasta, apoi e vorba despre epoca stalinistă, este despre familia Markovits care trece prin aceste perioade.
In English, and actually also in German, and now in Romanian, and by the way, I just found out just before getting on the plane that the book is coming out in Chinese. Insane. I mean, I have 4 books in Chinese, so maybe I'm kind of a star, and I have no idea. I have no idea. But the book is about passport, okay? And it's about constant transience. It's about rootlessness. And it's about a concept that was developed by Andrei and Stalin in 1946 and 1948 against rootless cosmopolitans, cosmopolite déracinés in French, which was a code word, of course, for Jews.
Cartea apare acum în limba chineză, este a 4-a carte care apare în limba chineză și vorbește de fapt despre un pașaport pornind de la identități tranzitorii, despre această trecere între diversele identități, venind de la Jdanov și de la Stalin, care e un concept help me.
Un concept quasi antisemit. Un concept de rootlessness, dezracinare, exactly, déraciné. In French it's cosmopolite déraciné, and which was basically a code word for Jews, and that Jews, of course, don't belong anywhere.
Era o idee că evreii nu aparțin niciunde și nu au rădăcini și era în esență un concept antisemit.
I always experienced this term, which was actually a pejorative term, and it's a Schimpfwort, it's a pejorative term. I always saw it as something good. I loved being called a cosmopolite déraciné. I thought this was I became very comforting, and that's how it's called in English. It's called the passport as home, comfort in rootlessness. Most people define their comfort in roots. I define them in my passport. By the way, my passport I take with me everywhere, constantly, supermarkets, but I always have my passport with me, okay?
Why?
Because it's my identity. Read the book. It's about my identity. To me, the passport is my home.
Totdeauna am iubit acest concept de cosmopolit dezrădăcinat, pentru că identitatea mea este de fapt pașaportul pe care l-am purtat peste tot.
Okay. Briefly, Stara Kutuzov numărul 1. A microcosm of Timișoara, and actually in some ways of the era that I'm just describing. On the bottom, the Haidu family, man and woman, Protestant, but I really don't remember whether they were Lutheran or Calvinist. Both exist in Hungarian. So it's Hungarian speaking. Above them, the Tsuneas, Mr. Tsunea, Mrs. Tsunea, and a beautiful young girl, 3-4 years older than I am, Livia, who were Romanian, but actually Catholic from the Banat. And next were the Markovitses, the only Jews, mother, father, and son, and above us were the tsikalas, who were regatieni, and they were mother, father, and Doina, who sang beautiful opera, and Tsuku, who was my hero, whom my mother hated, because he was this really bad boy. I mean, he smoked already, and I just loved the guy. I said, I love Tsuku. And, my mother was constantly shielding me away from Tsuku, and I just wanted more Tsuku.
Deci, strada, această casă cu Tuzov numărul 1 era un adevărat microcosmos. La parter stătea familia Hoidu, care erau protestanți sau calviniști sau luterani, iar mai sus stătea familia de români Sunea, care însă erau catolici. Lângă stătea familia Markovits, singurii evrei din clădire, iar deasupra stătea familia cu Tsucu, cei cu băiatul Tsucu, care era foarte rău, de mic, dar care exercita de mic o atracție deosebită, evident.
Wonderful, you're great. Let's talk briefly about the Markovits family. Hungarian-speaking Jews, which was very common in Timișoara. It was the lingua franca. Upper middle-class Jews. My mother proudly touting German culture. If you entered the Markovits home, you only saw music or saw records of Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, almost only Schumann, Schubert, almost all German composers. German literature, Hölderlin, certainly Goethe, Schiller, absolutely. If you were to have done an anthropological observation of entering the Markovits home, you would have not known, that this was a Holocaust-ravaged family in which, by my last count, 28 members of the family of some sort died, including my father's, both of his parents, 2 of his 6 siblings, 2 of whom actually went to Auschwitz and returned, and my mother lost her father.
Dacă intrai în casă, descopereai în familia Markovits o familie cosmopolită, vorbitori de limba maghiară, care era lingua franca atunci, erau de cultură germană, ascultau muzică germană, mari compozitori, mari scriitori de limbă germană. Nu ai fi putut să bănuiești că această familie a fost răvășită de ceea ce a însemnat Holocaustul, 28 de oameni care au murit în Holocaust, rude foarte apropiate, părinți, unchi, mătuși, care au pierit în Holocaust. Nimic nu spunea că acest lucru se putea întâmpla în această familie.
Yes. So, in other words, what is interesting is that the family, the family decoupled German culture from Germany. And so from early on, I actually learned a lot about German culture without really knowing what actually, it was just, somehow there was something in the room, as we say in English, the 800-pound gorilla that was never really verbalized in a major way, other than my Aunt Monsi, who lived on Doja Street 6. I visited today. And she always spoke about what happened to her. And this is, of course, a class difference. My mother, very much upper class Jewish, she was taught privately. She always went to Budapest every year to pass her exams, which is amazing. Think about this. She lives in Oradea, she lives in Romania, and she passes every year. She goes to Magan Tanulo, and she's going to Budapest, which actually led me to the great Markovits theory of European relations, which goes as follows. You hate all your neighbors, but those to the east you also disdain. You look down on them.
Era un lucru paradoxal că, deși s-au întâmplat toate acestea în Holocaust, cumva s-au decuplat de la ce a însemnat Holocaustul și cultura germană era în continuare îmbrățișată, în afară de o mătușă, Monții de pe strada Doja, care vorbea mereu despre ce s-a întâmplat în Holocaust. Mama domnului profesor venea din clasă medie înaltă, care în fiecare an mergea la examen la Budapesta, deci era ceva foarte aristocratic să mergi să susții examenul la Budapesta. Și am învățat din filozofia familiei Markovits că chiar îți disprețuiești vecinii, dar pe cei de la est îi privești și de sus.
Amazing, amazing. Kol hakavod, very impressive. We should give her a big applause. Very good, very good. Really. So in fact, so basically, for example, my mother always read to me, which is, I always remember my mother always lying in bed. She was ill, very ill, basically all her life. And of course, I went to the cemetery today, and again, she was buried on her 40th birthday. Think about this. She died, she was buried on May 18th, 1958, and she was born in May 18th, 1918, so it's 40 years old. And my mother always read to me in German. So for example, the Odyssey and Iliad was read to me in German. It's a joke. Why not in Hungarian? Last I looked, Homer wrote it in Greek. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's, but somehow reading it in German was more authentic or more, you know, behoved, to use a Yiddish term, which, by the way, interestingly, my parents also disdained. It was jargon. Okay, my father always called, I hated that, always called Yiddish a dialect. No, it's a language, it's not a dialect, okay? He never called Dutch a dialect, but Yiddish was a dialect. You know, it was just, you know, the Ostjuden, okay? Somehow the Polish, we are not that. This is, and so my mother, the only thing that she read to me in Hungarian, this is very interesting, only one thing, Palucai fiúk. The famous, the beautiful piece by, you know, Molnár on the boys of Paul Street.
Și aducea aminte astăzi de mama sa care a murit foarte devreme, la doar 40 de ani, în 1958, care îi citea întotdeauna în limba germană, inclusiv Iliada și Odiseea în limba germană, totdeauna celelalte limbi văzute ca nedemne, mai ales Yiddish, care era văzută ca un dialect estic
inferior.
Și singura carte citită în limba originală, în limba maghiară, Palucai fiúk, foarte faimoasă în acele vremuri.
Okay. So my father is from Satu Mare, my mother was from Oradea, and basically she never spoke Romanian and was actually almost proud of it. Okay, again, this notion that to the east it was somehow not worthy of being spoken. And I have one wonderful example in the book that we had a maid who helped my mother come in from the vicinity, from some village, Julishka. And Julishka was helping and putting up the laundry, and I was speaking in our little yard, which I showed you yesterday, little yard, and I was of course playing with Tsuku. And at some point, Julishka turns to me and says in Hungarian, "Don't speak Romanian." Okay, and I say to her, why? And she says, because it's a gonosz nyelv. Okay, in other words, it's an evil language. Think about this, okay? In other words, the notion, and this is a Hungarian peasant woman who actually has nothing but contempt for a language which is really the language of her country. So it's a very good example of this notion of what is accepted, what isn't accepted, and this thing about the Markovits theory of European relations.
Și tatăl era din satul mare, din Oradea, iar între ei, de bună înțelegere, nu vorbeau deloc limba română. Iar are o amintire în care o servitoare venită dintr-un sat alăturat, Iulișco, atunci când punea rufele la uscat, i-a spus la un moment dat, nu mai vorbi românește. Iar asta a rămas ca o amintire foarte ciudată, cum s-a putut așa ceva întâmpla, limba țării de atunci, cum a fost posibil să se spună așa ceva.
Basically, I grew up in a very happy family, in a very divided way. My mother was in charge of high culture. I learned my music. She got me to Ella Philipp. My mother played piano, and she actually also took some classes from Ella Philipp. So my mother was in charge of high culture. She was in charge of literature, of reading, of basically of the brain. And my father was in charge of fun. My father was in charge of lower culture. My father was in charge of going to watch trains. We always went to the train station somewhere, and then we took the number 6 tram to go past the Kolapo Sherdja. There was some kind of a brewery near in the Fabrik, and it had this kind of odd thing on the chimney, which like always said as like a Kolop. And so with my father, we went to the railroad, and above all, of course, football. So early on already, as a little boy, we went to the Știința Timișoara's games, and of course motorcycle races near the Capitol Theater. We always stood there watching them come down and turn around, and it's with my father that I link this obsession with sports to this day.
Mama era responsabilă de cultura superioară, de literatură, de artă, de muzică, l-a dus la Ella Philipp să învețe pian și ea la rândul ei a luat ore de pian, pe când tatăl era responsabil de cultura distractivă a familiei, să vadă trenurile, să vadă fabrica de bere cu umbrela asta specială deasupra, de asemenea la știința, la fotbal și alte activități sportive.
Yes.
Motociclism.
Yeah, motorbike. We were so-called neolog Jews, which I always have to explain to Americans, it's a very interesting, because in Europe there's only 2 divisions of Jewry, not 3. So if the neolog Jews have what in the United States would be from the Reform movement, there was an organ. There is an organ. And I asked, I will actually come back at some point when the organ will be played, I will be here. Because to me, in some ways, Jewishness or theology or Jewish experience is all about a sound. And it's this sound with the choir. There was a choir and an organ, which of course was so invented by the Germans in the 1830s, and this was neolog. I mean, outrageous. It was churches. It was basically the adaptation of church to Judaism. But I absolutely loved it, and to this day, I always associate the sound of this. We're neolog Jews, and this is very much part of the Reform movement. What is very much part of the conservative movement is that of the American conservative movement is men and women. I'm sorry, the Orthodox movement is men and women are separated. I mean, the women were upstairs and not downstairs. So you want to translate this, or yeah?
Deci, familia era neologă, foarte greu de explicat pentru americani ce înseamnă neologi, pentru că acolo există doar reform și ortodox, iar asociază iudaismul foarte tare cu muzica, cu sunetul orgii, cu corul, care erau de fapt adaptări din religiile creștine, dar care îi vorbesc atât de mult prin limbajul muzicii domnului profesor.
Da. My father taught me how to read Hebrew. but of course with the Ashkenazi, Baruch Atu Adonai, whatever. Clearly, later on I learned when I studied for my bar mitzvah and then in the United States of the Hebrew pronunciation. We were not kosher. We were not Shomer Shabbat. We basically never came on Shabbat, but always on Friday nights, I would say about 4 or 5 times a year. We always came to the high holidays. My mother came to those as well, always sitting there. I was always very proud to see her, very pretty, and talking to her girlfriends, all of whom, of course, are dead as well. I think I remember Eva in Australia. She actually, Erde Eva, she was also up there. We celebrated, we always fasted, or my parents fasted for Yom Kippur. And we always held 2 nights of Seder. And when Eliyahu was supposed to come in, my father, without fail, just like he mentioned, whenever he came here, it was almost like a kind of a psychological thing. He always had to mention Franz Joseph about the shul every time we came. Every single time for Seder, he said, this is when the pogroms happened. The Jews opened the doors and the pogroms happened. Every single time he said this. And then so we didn't open the door in Strada Kutuzov numero 1, we opened the window.
Deci familia, tatăl a învățat să citească literele ebraice, bineînțeles cu accentul acela așkenaz, Yiddish, și nu țineau cașrut, nu țineau șabatul, dar veneau pentru sărbători la sinagogă, țineau cele 2 seri de seder, așa era tradiția, nu țineau șabatul, dar țineau semnificația șabatului. Totdeauna de seder deschideau ușa pentru profetul Eliahu, dar tatăl își aducea aminte că atunci au început, asta era simbolul începutului pogromurilor și atunci deschideau mai bine geamul.
Exactly. The one thing that I think was really kept very strictly are the various yard sites. And I remember very often seeing candles. And as I said, there were lots of death in our family. So they did it was not only for my uncles who this and that, and I didn't, so the yard site was taken very seriously. And to this day, I must say, I'm very, very proud of having never missed a yard site for my mother since 1958, and always saying Kaddish. And this was very important. So the yard sites were something that, and of course the 4 Yiskers, or Maskirim as they say here, always go, to Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach and Shavuot to go to Yiskers. So we always went to those. And I still try to really go to all of those. This I'm not as good as with the Yiskers, with the yard sites. But on the whole, I try to maintain this importance of giving the honor to the dead.
Nu am spus înainte că am menționat că era foarte mândru când o vedea pe mama sa stând acolo sus și vorbind cu celelalte doamne foarte elegante, iar pentru familie păstrarea iscorului, a comemorării celor morți era un lucru foarte important. Fiecare iscor era ținut cu mare strictețe, iar și acum domnul profesor ține cu mare strictețe și a ținut din 1958 tot timpul comemorarea mamei sale și acele comemorări care sunt de 4 ori pe an, la marile sărbători, ca un lucru deosebit de important din religia noastră.
She did 1990, obviously for my father, who died in 1990, so of course I do the yard site that as well.
Și din 1999 și pentru tatăl său.
Yeah. Maybe 2 events I'd like to discuss, and then maybe we should open for questions. The one incident which was very, very important was the World Cup final, 1954, between West Germany and Hungary. And my father and I listened to this radio on our wonderful Blaupunkt radio. I remember.
Și vreau să menționeze două lucruri importante înainte de întrebări. Unul este din 1954, finalul campionatului mondial de fotbal între Germania de Vest și Ungaria, pe care îl ascultau la radioul Blaupunkt.
Da. Și Szepesi György, the famous Hungarian broadcaster, we listened to him, and as we well know, the Hungarians lose. And this is, to this day, by the way, the biggest upset in World Cup history, okay, by far. And interestingly, they're literally opposite each other. To Germany, I have one of my proudest dissertations written by Arthur Heinrich, die Gründung der Bundesrepublik Deutschland zu Wankdorf-Stadion zu Bern 1954. In other words, there's no question that this victory really establishes the Federal Republic's Wirtschaftswunder, and it's coming to term, entering the family of nations. No question. It's a huge boost, and of course to its football, on and on. To Hungary, it was exactly the opposite. It led to the revolution in '56. The Hungarian football never recovers to this day. And it's a major, major hiatus. It's a major dividing line. In Germany, Zimmermann is exactly the opposite of Szepesi. He goes crazy when Helmut Rahn scores the goal. Das Wunder von Bern, 1983. Great movie by Fassbinder, the Ehe de Maria Braun, when actually this is the symbol of literally the creation of the Federal Republic. Anyway, what is interesting to me, and I feel this, I'm a little boy, is that my father is not upset that the Hungarians lost, even though we knew the Hungarian players by name. To this day, I will not do it for you, but I can still mention the entire Hungarian team. Grosic, Buzanski, Laurent Lantos, Bozic Zakarias, Budai Kocsis, Cibor, Budai Kocsis, Hidekuti, Puskás, Cibor. I can still know this. And it's unbelievable. It's basically, I've discovered this, that, and I also know the Brazilian Seleção, and you know the New York Yankees. Basically, a little boy's head between the ages of 6 and 10 or 11. There's still no girls, there is no philosophy, there is no history, there's no other thing. And basically it's filled with this craziness of sports. You know, so I saw my translator, Julia Singer, who by the way, this is an amazing translation. I met her little boy, Aaron. And Aaron is like I was, and Aaron knows Manchester United, City, Juve, I mean, just knows all this, okay? He was like, so my father is not upset. I'm sorry, but you don't have to.
God now a lot, sorry.
Yeah,
because I don't know sport.
Don't worry.
Deci, în acest moment, 1954 și campionatul de fotbal era un lucru, faptul că Ungaria pierde atunci avea și un simbol politic foarte important pentru Germania, ce urma să intre cumva în elita internațională. Pe de altă parte, Ungaria să decadă foarte mult, iar apoi revolta din 1956 și etc., când Ungaria scade foarte mult, iar pentru un copil la acea vârstă, sportul era totul și ați văzut cum a enumerat toate numele jucătorilor de atunci. De asemenea, a spus despre Szepesi, acest comentator care era foarte cunoscut și care a comentat extraordinar meciul, la fel ca cel german care cumva era opus ca stil.
Și my father was not upset.
Și tatăl nu era supărat că i-a pierdut Ungaria.
Nu supărat, yeah, exactly. Supărat, da. And he turns to me and basically says the following. He said, this is not an important thing about who wins and who loses. This was a match between two horrible nations that played an awful, horrible thing to you and your family. And the only thing that matters today is that it's the birthday of the United States of America. And then he says in English, the 4th of July. Amazing. And this is
the final?
Yes, of course. That's what that's the day, of course, that's the whole point.
Și a spus un lucru foarte important pentru el atunci, că nu contează cine a pierdut și cine a câștigat, pentru că a fost meciul între două națiuni îngrozitoare care au făcut foarte mult rău și că singurul lucru important, că acea dată de 4 iulie a fost data nașterii Americii.
Da. And this is the first time the United States becomes sort of present for me, other than there is a distant uncle, Alex, who lives in New York and who occasionally sends me cars, little cars. And it really didn't exist. And it's the first time that this enters, and this is very, very important to my later development. So I just developed this in the book. And as an idea, which is sort of an event. The other event that I want to describe very briefly is my mother's death in May, and then our departure, my father's departure from Timișoara on September 1st, 1958, very soon after my mother's death. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Și pentru prima dată atunci a aflat și l-a marcat ideea de Statele Unite. Până atunci era asociată doar cu un unchi mai îndepărtat, Alex, care îi trimitea mașinuțe. Iar cea de-a doua întâmplare foarte importantă, marcantă pentru domnia sa, este faptul când a decedat mama lui în luna mai, iar în luna septembrie au emigrat.
Yes. Yesterday, when we got access somehow with Benny's help to my old house, the woman who talked to us mentioned the Haidu still, and above all mentioned a man by the name of Merginianu, who was actually the police chief or whatever of Timișoara, who moved in right after we left. So, it's a very interesting story. Actually, this name still existed. It's obviously sounds very interesting. So, yeah, go ahead.
Ieri când au intrat în casa lor de odinioară, femeia care era acolo a menționat de familia Hoidu, chiar și acum, și despre cel care a intrat imediat după ei în casa lor, un șef al poliției numit Mărgineanu.
Yes. And we left very quickly. And I was actually at a certificat de călătorie, I actually still have it at home, and I was on my mother's certificat. So we arrive in Curtici. I'm going to tell the story and then we'll stop. We arrive in Curtici, we have 2 bags, and this was a big, big farewell, a big goodbye. We basically, I mean, very hard for young people to understand what this was. I mean, you left Romania, you left the Iron Curtain. We thought, or the feeling was, we would never see these people again. Okay? This was a big, big thing. My Aunt Monsi was crying, and they helped us pack, and you know, and I remember her husband Richard was always making jokes. Men always make jokes. It's very funny when it's important they make jokes. And Monty, it was a big thing, and we arrive in Curtici, and the train, of course, and they go through our stuff, and suddenly the officer says, "Where is Ida Markovits?" And of course, there is no Ida Markovits. She's dead. So why is he on why is the sun on this path? What's going on? And he calls my father, and they go to some building, some house. They disappear from the train. And in the train, I am alone with a young soldier. He was probably 18. And imagine this, again, my mother dies, I'm leaving everything that I loved. And I loved Timișoara. I had good friends. I was, by the way, a big guy because I owned the football, which means it was my football, and I decided who plays and what they play and what position they play. I was a big yichus, okay? I was a big cheese guy. I owned the football, okay? And so life was good. I mean, I didn't know about Stalinism. I didn't know about my communism. I mean, I didn't know any of this. And you leave. Your mother's out, and you leave to somewhere, Vienna, maybe, officially to Israel, but we knew that we would not go to Israel. Hopefully the United States, but it's all, okay? And so I'm in this train alone with this guy, and what happens, I dedicate the book to 5 people who influenced my life so much in a good way, whom I have nothing in common with and don't have. This soldier and I start talking about football, about Stinza and the next coming season. And we sit there, and he has a bayonet, which will play a role in a minute, and and we talk about Stinza, what the next season will be or whatever, and it's a human interaction. It's unbelievable. Okay? Back comes the boss with my father, and he is disconsolate. He's very angry, kind of nervous or angry or upset, and he has us open the suitcases, both. So open up the suitcase, okay? And maybe worried that we're smuggling something or whatever, he goes through everything in the suitcase, okay? And then he finds my teddy bear. Bears play an important role here, big role in the book. I'm very upset when I see a gypsy or a Roma having a dancing bear on the Domplatz. Very upset about this. Thank God this doesn't exist anymore, okay? But bears play a role. I fall in love with Medved Russian chocolate, which a Russian colonel who's in our house brings me. And so I have a little bear called Dovi, which of course in Hebrew means bear, okay? And the officer commands the soldier to use his bayonet to open the bear, maybe thinking that was in it, and he ruins my Dovi right there in Kurtic. That was it. As I end the chapter, 1958 was a bad year. So my first dog later, and I'm obsessed with dogs, my first dog in 1988, I of course named him Dovi. And my father didn't quite connect this, which really angered me. My father didn't know that my beloved bear in Timișoara was called Dovi. He was a father, he didn't know.
Deci este vorba despre secvența când au plecat, au plecat cu trenul la Cenat și el era pe casă de călătorie a mamei sale, la Curtici, a mamei sale pe care o pierduse în urmă cu câteva luni. Și când au ajuns acolo la graniță, au întrebat unde este mama sa, evident ea nu era, iar tatăl a fost luat deoparte și el a rămas cu un soldat. Și pe lângă faptul că era ruperea aceasta de mediu și toată lumea, noi înțelegem acum diferit lucrurile, dar atunci era clar că după cortina de fier erau șanse foarte mici să mai revezi pe oamenii pe care îi lăsai în urmă, era traumatizat și de pierderea mamei și de această ruptură atât de radicală. Acolo era un soldat cu care a început să vorbească despre fotbal și despre știință. Și au povestit și s-au apropiat. Pe de altă parte a venit șeful aceluia, cel care fusese cu tatăl în spate, a deschis cu baioneta toate bagajele și l-a scos pe ursulețul Dovi, care era o amintire, nu? Care mergea mai departe și l-a spintecat cu baioneta că poate avea ceva droguri sau ceva în el.
Diamonds, yeah, not droguri. Jewelries, yes.
Aia era...
Yeah, more jewelry than drugs. Yeah. Today maybe drugs, no. Yeah.
Și a fost câinele, primul câine pe care l-a avut în 1988, l-a numit Dovi după acest ursuleț.
I think rather than, you're brilliant. I think rather than go on and talk about Colombia and New York and Vienna and which is all important, I think maybe we should stop here, and I'd be delighted if you ask questions. I'll answer them if I can. I think that's probably better than going on about stuff that may or may not interest you. So.
Decât să continuăm acum cu universități, despre Columbia sau altele, mai bine acum cine dorește să adreseze întrebări.
Yes.
You tried to connect with your friends after you left Romania?
Connect with my friends who remained here?
Yeah, in Timișoara, yes. After you lost,
well, actually, interestingly, quite a few or some of them started coming. Started and often arrived in Vienna. When did you go? You left in 1959, or you didn't leave? I'm sorry. Of course you didn't leave. No. But I'm associate because I kept in touch with her in some ways. But Tausig, that people come. I kept in touch some, but not. I mean, mainly my father kept in touch. I didn't keep in touch. Yeah. But.
How do you see Timișoara now with these eyes, after you leave so many successful years in the United States? How can you see Timișoara now? How is it?
Well, today, I mean, I thought Timișoara is, first of all, it's beautifully green, which I love. I mean, lots of parks. I hired a taxi and I had him drive me around for 2 hours. I mean, I told him here. And I just wanted to get a sense, and it's actually it's verdura, which reminds me very much of my town where I now live for the last 25 years, namely Ann Arbor, Michigan, which of course is Arbor, Ann Arbor, right? It's a very. I mean, before that I was only here in 1970 once. And then in 2012, which was also already very wonderful with Luciana, and also here. And the mayor gave me a lovely certificate de excellenza, whatever, from Mayor Ciuhandu, whatever that means, but it's very nice. I'm very flattered. And yeah, I mean, what I find also fascinating is that today's youth is completely international. I mean, they're into TikTok. She's from Berkeley. I mean, yeah, she's going to Berkeley, but I mean, I'm sure. So clearly, this is obviously a form of class. And I can only talk about very cosmopolitan Jewish kids who are studying at the Sciences Po, obviously. So this, of course, does not pertain to a working class kid who's from the peasantry and coming to Timișoara, clearly. But I always say, I mean, in many things, the world is really problematic. But I'm always, as I say in the book, and I think that the book's strength in some ways is two things. It doesn't look back in anger. This comes out in many reviews. Okay, I'm not an angry guy. I could have really been, and I don't, other than against Vienna, there is nothing, I don't say anything bad about anybody. I'm the ones, because I don't feel it. I mean, other than Vienna, for reasons that are obvious. And even that is actually in some ways unfair, because today would be different. I think this is, the world is a more integrated and more enlightened place. I really do think that. And I mean, I'm just delighted to see, you know, Eva's granddaughter. I mean, that's just, you know, it's a really machaye. I mean, just it's a good thing. It's a good, you know, she goes to Trinity College. It's wonderful. I mean, and that's the reality also of a Timișoara, which Eva did not have. Okay, she did not have the choice to go. I mean, or she could have maybe, but at a tremendous cost, at a cost of giving up her hevre for everything, and there were costs. I mean, you know, again, I ultimately thrived in it because of my father's unconditional love. Okay, it wouldn't have happened. I mean, Columbia, Harvard, all of these are, but it's, the basis was a form of, no matter how hard I fought my father, and he fought me, I always knew that there was sort of he ultimately really respected and loved me and what I did, okay? And that's just a wealth that can't be repaid. I mean, it's just impossible. It's not about money. And so it's not an angry book. It's a very tolerant book. And so I actually don't, I mean, Timișoara was good to me. I mean, I had my own football, I had good food, you know, I had friends, and describe the friends, I mean, not with name, but you know, we actually live. It was also very interesting. I wonder what Eva would say about this, but I remember it was not a very, there was not much envy. It's interesting, and partly because this is in some ways a socialist. No one was particularly rich. Okay, and people weren't sort of like today, you know, which someone is wearing Gucci or whatever. Okay, we were all sort of. All of us had our rollers and we had our bikes, and it was actually kind of a, you know, it was a decent life, not a very complicated one. And we did not know about our parents' plight. My father, they protected us. I did not know much about the Holocaust, which is, other than Monsi screaming at night. I stay over at Monsi, okay, occasional Doja Utsa, and suddenly she, Onyuka Nemenyel, in the middle of the night. What is this? And then I come back to my father and say, what is Monsi saying? He said, you know, girls, they all say things. So it's horrible. I was so angry at him later. How could you say this? What do you mean, what is this bullshit? It's horrible, excuse me. You know, and so Stalinism, yes. We felt something. So, for example, I knew that my mother, because she was so ill and she stayed at home, she was in some ways sort of a center of, and people called, and you know, this was in 51, 52, 53, where people disappeared, and you know, so somehow, I mean, I sensed this, but not really, okay, because my father protected me from this, and so. Even the Soviet occupation, our first occupying officer was Yosef. I loved the guy. He brought me Medved chocolate, and he threw me up in the air. Every day he came back, and he just hugged me. And once I was ill, and he told my mother to give me lots of vodka. Someone, my mother said, no, I think maybe not such a good idea. Okay? But I love the guy, and he always took me on his Willys, which of course were Willys, the U.S. Army's export, obviously, through the war. And he took me with his Willys, and I sat on his lap, you know, and driving as an officer of the Red Army. I mean, hello? This is a cool thing. I mean, you know, are you kidding me? I love the guy. He disappeared. very quickly. My father and I reconstructed. It must have been after 53, and we think it was after Stalin, and they called back. We never heard. It was horrible. The guy who came after him, oh God, thank God he left fairly soon. He beat, exactly the opposite. He never spoke to us, and he had a little girl whom he beat almost every night. And I heard this girl scream, and my mother held me and turned up Beethoven, okay, or turned up Beethoven, or even the anti-Semite Wagner. We heard Lohengrin, which was drown out this girl's screams. I have no idea what his name was. He disappeared very soon. This must have been like 54, 55. The Russian army, the Soviet army actually leaves Romania in 57, but already 55 withdraws. I'm not quite sure why. It was a beautiful house. So I'm not quite, I mean, we had a number of rooms. They had their own apartment within our apartment. So Yulichka couldn't live there, but the Soviets did. And again, Yosef was the best. Okay, I always have this sort of apropos Red Army. Okay, the only contempt my father and mother had all the time. I never heard one bad thing about the Wehrmacht or the Germans. Nothing. Nothing good, but nothing bad. The Russians were always bad. They rape, they steal, they this. They have lots of watches, they this and that. And when you think about it, the reason I'm here, and many of us are here, is because of the Red Army. Okay? Otherwise, the Germans would have taken Timișoara and we wouldn't be here. Okay? So it's interesting that their savior, ultimately, they have nothing but contempt for. They have I never heard anything about, we're here, or, these guys did something good. They were only bad. It's interesting, completely, okay? And which is so counterintuitive. And so later on, of course, I had huge fights with my father about this. And the only time when he really lost it about the Holocaust was in 1974 in New York. I was writing my dissertation, and it was when the Zionism is racism UN thing was, I think in 74, okay? And somehow we got into but I explained the Palestinian position. I did not advocate it, I explained the Palestinian position, okay? And he just lost it. And he was screaming at me, something about Kemensen, Židok nemim Kemensen, with completely, and I just went, whoa, my God. And he just completely was beside himself and was trembling, okay, about it. And so in 1974, I'm an adult. It's the first and only time, actually, that this came out. And somehow, that it was really traumatic for him too in some ways. And it comes out much later, okay, in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which actually, of course, has something to do with the Holocaust, but is really not part of the Holocaust. And anyway, so I hope I responded to you. Yeah, wonderful.
Dacă dați voie puțin să vi-l imaginați pe Andrei, la vârsta la care a emigrat, un băiat dolofan, cu părul roșu, cu pistrui și cu pantaloni scurți. Așa era el.
Yes.
Când ați reluat legătura? Când ați aflat de el?
Păi mereu am ținut legătura, adică ei au venit frecvent la mormântul mamei și în special tatălui.
Tata Iura.
Și pe urmă, când a venit în 2011, ne-am întâlnit.
Da, mai mult. Yeah.
Vreau să întrebați ceva.
Eu pe Domnul nu am citit, nu-l cunosc cât l-am văzut data trecută și acum am ascultat. Dar ce e special la dumnealui îmi aduce aminte de personajele lui Alexandru Nabokov din America.
Yes, you are like a personage of Nabokov. You remind
și al singurității universale. Și foarte interesant
The
că momentan
universal loneliness and
nu-l găsesc așa să-l asociez cu un scriitor român, mai ales că nici nu l-am citit, dar și-aș fi vrut să-l întreb. El își reconstruiește lumea de aici doar pe baza poveștilor din familie sau și imaginează și dacă a fost, dacă l-a cunoscut pe
you
Nabokov.
rebuild your stories about Timișoara just by memories or also by imagination? And
No, by memories. I'm not a literature person.
Fantastică asemănarea între aceste
Thank you.
cu toate motivele pe care are acel personaj și autobiografic povestea personajului.
the story of Nabokov and
Well,
the memories.
Nabokov is a great writer. Although, actually, when I gave this talk in Berkeley, actually, it's very funny. In Berkeley, I gave this talk about the book, and someone said, like you, the first time somebody is like Nabokov, and then someone in the audience said, but yes, but Andy's a much nicer person. I mean, Nabokov, look, I'm not this is a very outlying book. My books otherwise are very about political science, very, very scholarly, very arid, very boring maybe, very, it's very special books. This happened because of COVID. Without COVID, there is no book, okay? What happened was that COVID strikes.
Thanks to Chinese.
Whatever. I don't know about that. Probably, but anyway, it strikes, and it was very scary for me personally, and above all, there was no sport, nothing. No NBA, no basketball, no soccer, nothing. There was Belarusian Soccer League and South Korean baseball at 4 a.m., okay? Nothing to watch, and I watch all the time, and it was very scary, and I suddenly had a lot of time, and I couldn't do my normal research because my normal research is interviewing and going to places and looking at a political party, analyzing. You can't do this. I couldn't travel. You couldn't fly, nothing. And I started playing with this idea. And then I was walking my dog, not Dovey, long dead, and it was Înte Mai. I remember this, because Înte Mai, I still remember Înte Mai, zi de mare sărbătoare pentru clasa muncitoare. Every time I say this, all the time when on the 1st of May, I would say, come up with this is the only thing I remember, okay? And a very famous professor of English literature walks on the other side of the street, because of course you have to walk on the other side of the street. It's COVID, we don't walk on the same side of the street. It's crazy. I don't know her very well, but she's there, and her daughter was one of my best students. So I know the daughter, not the father, the mother. And the mother walks by, and I say, Scotty, you're a member of this famous and very large English department. She said, don't you maybe have a young professor who teaches literature and writing, creative writing, which I've never done? And wouldn't they be interested in helping me write my memoir, just to help me write in this style, because it's a totally different style, completely. I mean, you have to understand, this is not with footnotes. It's not about fact. I mean, it's all about imagination or how do you construct this, okay? And for a second, I didn't want to do it. I said, how do we know this? How do we know it's true what I say about Yosef? I mean, do I have footnotes? Can I cite him? Can I find his how do we know this? Well, it's a story. We hope it's correct, but it need not be. The whole notion of verification, the whole notion of, that's what my entire life has been about. I can show you the interview. Here it's not that. So it was very hard for me to write. And Scotty got me together with the creative writer professor who now had retired to New York. And she was this woman who, by the way, I've yet to meet. I've never met her. This brilliant creative writing professor who has created many, many writers who have won Pulitzer Prizes and very good. And I told her this. And she said, I don't take anyone on. And I said, and then she called me back and said, let's talk. And we talked, and she said, Eileen Pollock, Jewish woman, 60, my age almost, and she said, I want to take you on. Let's start. And I sent her my first 5 pages, and the next morning I get back a disaster. This is crap, horrible, rewrite. And I go, oh my God, I mean, I'm a famous professor. What are you talking about? No. You don't do this like this. This is completely, redo it. Okay, it was amazing. I mean, so I spent 5 months of the summer months writing. I basically was in a intensive writing class from morning to night, and she gave me back feedback, all on email. If she walked in here, if Eileen Pollock walked in here, I wouldn't know who she is. I've never seen her, because she lives in New York, and all of this is possible with today's thing, it's no problem. And she really helped me write this. I mean, she forced me to really write well. I mean, I write well as an academic, but not like this. And so Interacted is written in a very good style, and that's all because I had this strict tutor, okay, who really, I never forget, for example, I write about a friend of mine, Jeff Weintraub, back comes, Jeff Weintraub is totally irrelevant. I say, but I love Jeff Weintraub. I said, that's okay. Well, of course, you love everybody. What are you talking about? Why is he, but to the reader, Jeff Weintraub is unimportant, and not in this context. You have to make him important in a context. And then she gave me this example, which I will never forget. She said, do you care that, then she mentions a name, some Jewish kid's name. Do you care that he left me and I was at Yale and he was my boyfriend and he left me? I said, not really, I don't care. I said, exactly. Now let me tell you why you should care. If I tell you that I become Yale University's first female physics major because Danny left me, isn't that already more interesting? I said, yes, that's what I want you to write about Jeff Weintraub. In other words, you have to make it relevant to the reader. And that's what it was. It was the most intense seminar I ever had in my life. And then it was over, and she was very proud of me. And then she said, goodbye. I said, goodbye? What do you mean? Please, I need the publishers. You have to help me get it. Andy, it's over. And she gave me sports language. Andy, I am your trainer. Okay, and you are now a fit team, and you play, okay? I have nothing to do with this. Goodbye. She got a book. She's still very proud of the reviews, but she is, and so she is part of this creative process, okay, of Nabokov.
What is your favorite sport? You mentioned a lot.
Obviously football, but also basketball. Soccer, yeah, soccer. Yeah, America. Yeah. So I'm very sad because, of course, last night I watched. I watched, and Manchester City beat Inter, and of course I'm a huge Manchester United fan. And it was very painful for me to see this. And actually, I was in a bar on the Lloyd Shore. I was interested, by the way. I thought that most people were neutral, maybe a little bit more Inter, I don't know. But anyway, and then I left. I paid very quickly and I left quickly. I didn't want to see Manchester City celebrate. Yeah, no. You know, very big rivalry. So, anyway. Do I have what?
Hobbies.
Hobbies. I only have hobbies. My hobbies are, that's why my colleagues hate me. I have succeeded in making my hobbies academic disciplines. So I love dogs. I write a award-winning book about, it's called From Property to Family, American Dog Rescue and the Discourse of Compassion. It's a scholarly work of dog rescue, okay? So I worked on this for 7 years on that book. I have written a lot of sports books. I started with football books, when it was not kosher yet. And it was very, and I basically transformed sports into an academic field. And many of my, so I have many hobbies. Music, yes, theater.
Expect for your next memoir book?
No more next memoir book.
No?
No. No.
Rolling Stones are a hobby.
What?
Rolling Stones are a hobby.
Oh, well, music. I mean, there's a chapter about the Rolling Stones, and the reason their chapter is in that, about the Rolling Stones, is because it's the only time my father hit me.
Because of Rolling Stones?
But because I lied to him. But because of it's a wonderful story. It's because the Rolling Stones were a challenge to his culture. Had I, very briefly, I lied to him that I am going to teach someone, and I went to the Stones, and I come back and I'm dancing on the streets, and suddenly on the way back, suddenly who is literally there waiting for me but my father on Kaiserstraße, Lerchenfelderstraße in Vienna, and I just freeze, and my father sees me, and we didn't talk for 5 days. He just, and my point was that had I done this, had I said I go to teach, but had I gone to the opera to hear Leontyne Price or a major soprano, he would have not hit me. In other words, it would have been acceptable. He would have been angry that I lie, but he would have not hit me. But it would have been acceptable. But the Rolling Stones in 1964-5 are a challenge to everything he is. And then I argue we end the chapter by 1982, we're in Madrid, and for the World Cup, again for football, and the Rolling Stones play in Madrid, okay? And my father suddenly says, András, don't you think I could come to the Stones concert with you? I said, whoa! I said, sure. Well, you know, it's a little hot, but you know, yes. And the Stones had lost their edge. The Stones were just a band, okay? And why? Because of course the Stones in general had lost their edge. They were multi-billionaires. But secondly, by this time, in 1965, it was little András, who was a 16-year-old student. And who knows what happens to him? Oh my God, right? In 1982, he's already a professor. It's okay. Stones, schmones, whatever, he's fine. He's safe. The reason, and the Grateful Dead, there's a chapter, the reason the Rolling Stones are there is because they are a representation of something that was threatening to my father, and he hit me. It's the only time in his life, never as a boy. He never, once I actually, he took away a toy from me, and I was such an actor, and I just went, you know, my father had hurt me. And I walked around with my, look at me, I was my right arm and whatever, and everybody was my, poor Andrei, poor whatever. And then Monsi comes with a truck, and I pull out the arm, which of course is wrong, and of course everybody saw that it was a joke. I lied about my father. I kind of played the guilty kid, but my father never hit me, and other than with the Rolling Stones. And it was a clear act of anger, but it saved me in the following way. That Saturday, it was on a Saturday, in the Vienna Courier, there is a picture of two Orthodox Jewish young women who went to religion class with me. And to this day, I'm sworn I never told the woman's name. Okay, it's in the book. She's not listed. No one knows this. But she actually is there, pictured in a restaurant with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and whatever. And unbelievable. Okay, and of course I know that they are there because, I went to religion class, I never dared ask what happened. I mean, they were attractive 16-year-old, and the Rolling Stones at the time are 21. I mean, you have these pictures, they're young guys, they're kids. And we do know that these two poor Orthodox women were, I do know that from her, whose name will always remain with me, she actually told me that her father beat her savagely, okay, because it was a shande. She brought a shande to the family that there was in the Wiener Courier, there were these two Jewish girls sitting next to Mick Jagger and Keith Richards in a restaurant, and they probably lied too to their parents, okay, of course. And I was actually just totally jealous that, she got to see Mick Jagger and I couldn't see Mick Jagger. Very simple, very simple. She wore mini skirts. She had a certain attraction that I just couldn't rival, and anyway, but I occasionally, I'm going to ask her again in Vienna, why, she's now a 77-year-old fourfold grandmother. And I always ask her, say, why can't I reveal you? I mean, why? She says, no one is to know about this. No. And it's actually, I said, it's in the paper, but of course with no name, okay? And they don't say, but of course, you have to understand again about Vienna Jewish, here are these Polish Jewish immigrants who come to Vienna and are so interested in integrating and about what their life is. They're completely insecure, and so they're finally, the girls go to gymnasium, whatever, and here is for their father, they suddenly are discovered with the Rolling Stones, and to all us kids, especially the boys, this was unbelievable. I mean, they became so popular. I mean, I just. You were with Mick Jagger, and they also spoke very good English. Why did they speak very good English? Because they went to Orthodox Jewish summer camp, which of course were in England. You couldn't go anywhere else in the continent. And so they went to England, kosher summer camps to England. They spoke excellent English, and she tells me that she was only there to translate for the Viennese journalists. Je ne sais pas. I'm not sure, but it's okay. Whatever happened, happened.
So Rolling Stones or Beatles? Rolling Stones or
different, very different, very different. Different. They're also, by the way, it doesn't have to be one or the other. They're both different.
I think that it's important everybody to be also tomorrow to the university, because I'm sure it will be totally different than today.
No, it will not be as Hamish as they say, and it will not be in this major, amazing edifice, which is, unique. I mean, one more thing about this shul. Cantor Katz, he stood here, And he turned around here on Shabbat and blessed the wine with this amazing voice. And Jon Hollander, whom all of you know, read my book in German. We're not in touch. And he read the book in German and loved it and contacted my German editor and wanted to be in touch with me. And he loved the book, and he said, and by the way, I'm so grateful that you mentioned Cantor Katz. Cantor, in his autobiography, which I will get, he will give me, I'm seeing him in Vienna on Friday, he in his autobiography says that Cantor Katz would be actually a major tenor in the Vienna Staatsoper. His tenor was so good. So if he says that, so anyway, there you go. So Cantor Katz always, Baruch, was amazing the way, and I will never forget, he sang with his funny hat, and Moti Baci was the rabbi, who, wonderful story, he's long dead, and so he would come over for some dinner or whatever at my mother's house, and he would go, and my mother would serve some beautiful ham, and he goes over to say, Itzukam, it was as hoi, Lozot says, whatever. Okay, so if there are no,
Dacă nu mai sunt alte întrebări, vă așteptăm să le adresați mâine, neapărat, la universitate. Vă așteptăm pe toți la ora 11 în sala A01 și sigur ne vom bucura iarăși de un timp minunat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.